So hi, everybody. Before I get into the meat of my talk, I thought I'd like to share a little bit about myself. You see, throughout my career, I've been called a goo-goo, a mugwump, or my very favorite way I've been described is famously obstreperous. That was the New Republic. But really, I'm just a nice Southern girl from Louisville who came of age in the 1960s. My first job was working with Ralph Nader. I was a research assistant on a book called Proudly We Hail, a project that introduced me to people and organizations that were doing good things in this country. People like Hazel Henderson, the environmentalist who was one part strategist, one part pamphleteer, one part lobbyist, and one part visionary. Or Maggie Kuhn, the founder of the Grey Panthers, a national organization of old militant people, or maybe it's militant old people. Ultimately, and probably without knowing it, I designed my own life's work after people just like that. That was the beginning of my work. I also had a few wonderful years working on Capitol Hill. First, I worked for the House Intelligence Committee. I know, it's an oxymoron. But that was the beginning in my interest in the issues of transparency, because I was focused on unearthing the FBI, formerly secret, COINTELPRO documents. Later, I became an expert for the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee on government organization, counterterrorism, and nuclear nonproliferation. And yes, I know what throw weight is. But since 1984, when I became the founding director of the Center for Responsive Politics, I've been studying, investigating, and making the links about who has the power in this country, why, what can we do about it, and how. So today, as you probably guessed, I'm going to tell you we are living in the best of times and also the worst of times. Why the best of times? It's for all the reasons that we have spent this entire day here. Because technology enables stuff to happen, to be absorbed, to be understood in ways that could never happen before. It's a disruptor of the status quo. It enables the building of global networks of citizens who care about the same things that you care about. Information is the bedrock of democracy. Without it, we can't make informed decisions, and with it, we can learn who and what to trust. And we are starting to live in the golden age of real-time, relevant information. Let me show you what I mean. At the Center for Responsive Politics, we began to produce a report called Open Secrets that looked like this. See this? I'm going to throw it on the rug. For years, if you wanted to know how much your congressman had gotten from an industry or an interest group, that's what you needed to have on your desk. Not that many people had it on their desk, right? Then when the web came along, we started putting information online. But it was kind of ugly. But it wasn't actually until I came to PDF, my very first PDF, the very first PDF, back in 2004, that I got a glimpse of what was truly possible. I was sitting in the audience at the New School. Was there anyone else who was here at the very first PDF? Wow. Wow, I'm not alone. And next to me was my longtime colleague, Mika Sifry. A lobbyist was on stage, and this is sort of what the audience looked like, I guess. A lobbyist was on stage talking about how the internet was supposedly shifting power in national politics to small donors. Now, when you consider that less than 1/4 of 1% of Americans make a campaign contribution of $200 or more, even today, that was a laughable claim. So Mika elbowed me. He went online with his laptop to look up the speaker's campaign finance profile, and lo and behold, he found that that speaker had given some $80,000 himself. Mika posted that information into a back channel. There was a screen behind the panel, and soon the crowd was laughing along with the two of us. And to be fair, the speaker started laughing as well once he realized what was going on. And meanwhile, The light bulbs were going off in my head. Imagine if we could get that kind of real-time transparency, like what Mika and I were doing to that speaker. Imagine we could have that in real time. Let's fast forward to today and why it might be the worst of times. Trust in government couldn't be much lower. The connection between us and the people we elect to govern us is dangerously frayed. Everywhere you go, people talk about Washington as if it's a foreign country. There are lots of reasons for that, but there is no question in my mind, and I bet in the minds of most of you, that the biggest cause is the influence of money on elected officials, compounded by the way that so much of what Washington does is out of the public view. You know, we are in for an election like none we've ever seen before, certainly since the days of Watergate, when hidden slush funds in those days, suitcases stuffed with hundreds of thousands of dollars from corporations and cronies of Richard Nixon, by the way, happy 40th anniversary, Watergate, they were used to pay for all kinds of dirty tricks. This time, the tricks will all be technically legal, but a lot of the money will be hidden. In 2010, outside groups spent nearly $455 million to influence elections, and of that, about $126 million came from secret donors. The numbers in 2012 are going to be a lot worse. We're talking about at least $1 billion, if not billions of dollars. Whenever people ask me what will be spent, my response to that is, whatever it takes, they will spend. So in this context, it makes a lot of sense for Americans to decide that Washington isn't run by them and for them. You might say, in fact, given this situation, that we should give up on transparency in politics. But that would be like getting rid of speed limits just because some people don't obey them, or traffic lights because some people ignore them, or saying that doctors don't need licenses because some quacks do practice without them. Well, we can't give up, because if we gave up fighting for transparency and connecting the dots, then we'd be giving up on self-government too. Here's a more optimistic note. First, transparency of political information makes a difference. There isn't a news story today that would make half the sense it does if we let transparency about money and politics disappear. If we didn't have disclosure laws, this is what the news would look like. Second, what is starting to happen now that the core data about legislators, votes, money, lobbying, and government spending is all available in machine-readable formats and mashable form is something like this. One developer made this amazing site, we saw it earlier today, that was cited extensively during the SOPA-PIPA fight last January, showing that all the lawmakers who had taken positions on the bills and how much money they received from the entertainment sector versus the tech sector. The fight over SOPA, by the way, could well be the tipping point towards a data-powered democracy that we vitally need, because it taught a lot of savvy tech developers a vital lesson. Randy Meach's SOPA track, this is a tweet from Randy, was built using APIs from Sunlight and maplight.org. He started by looking at the correlation between campaign contributions and SOPA, but now his site looks at how every member of Congress leans towards their cash constituents. Indeed, developers today are using congressional data sets at an amazing pace. Here's what we're seeing just for our own APIs. The open architecture that allows any developer to plug into our data. And a third point. This is starting to happen everywhere. Take this story from Alabama. 2 years ago, Stephen Jackson, a resident of a small town, Chelsea, Alabama, was surprised to discover that his home state actually had an online database of legislation, but it was practically unusable. So Stephen, an IT expert, began to play around with it and see if he could come up with a better way to publish bills and votes and other legislative data. The result was openbama.org, an independent volunteer initiative to make the Alabama legislature more accessible to the public. Since then, he's connected to our Open States project, and came to Transparency Camp 2 years in a row. If everyday folks can bring transparency and sunlight to the Alabama legislature, we can do it anywhere. And this is the foundation on which we rebuild civic trust in government. I know this work is not easy, but if change were easy, it would have happened already. It's hard, but it's worth doing if you care about having a government that's accountable to its citizens. Let me finish with this thought, which I'm borrowing from the veteran organizer, Marshall Gans. When I was young, I thought social change would be something we'd win in a sprint. Then, as I got older, I thought it was more like a marathon, and you had to be a long-distance runner. Now I realize it's a relay race, and I'm very glad that there are so many people who are joining us in the fight to carry the baton forward. Thanks so much for your time.